Now, meanwhile, here's some stories, lighthearted stories from my grandfather's younger sister, Okite. She said every morning Kikuo fed the horses. His father was a veterinarian as a morning chore. When returning home from school, Kikuo played in a creek. He caught river crabs and, unagi, eels, with his bare hands. And his nickname was Hidari Gicho, or lefty. And in our family, we still have lefties. One of my daughters, my brother's daughter. Interesting. Anyway. In 1904, my grandfather's 10. Next war starts, this time between Japan taking on a European power, Russia, over the Korean peninsula. And after a year of stalemate, Russia sends their Baltic fleet halfway around the world to engage the Japanese Navy, and actually that's where the original kamikaze came, I think. It helped the Japanese Navy sink the Soviet Navy. Well, it wasn't Soviet, sorry, Russian Navy. And they had a stunning victory. The underdog won. And it was so stunning that people realized this is the first time a non-white power has beat a European power. Oh my goodness. So, our good old San Francisco Chronicle reacted and said, the Japanese invasion, the problem of the hour. At least 100,000 of the little brown men are here, meaning in the stateside, already, and a torrent would ensue once this war ended. The yellow peril, how Japanese crowd out the white race. Thank you, Hearst. Good way to sell newspapers. San Francisco School District next got into the act. In 1906, the San Francisco School Board segregated out all the Japanese and made them attend a pre-existing school for Chinese called the Oriental School. This caused a ruckus between the Japanese government and California. Japan wished they could go to war with California. Anyway, headline, San Francisco Chronicle, brown men and evil in the public schools. And President Teddy Roosevelt had to personally intervene and keep this from just heating up further. And he brokered a deal where the Japanese students could return to their regular schools in return for the Japanese government agreeing voluntarily to restrict all further labor immigration from Japan into the United States. Now, the gentleman's agreement still allowed family members to come. Picture brides. This is when a lot of picture brides came. Now, the door was going to close February 2008. So, my great-grandfather Saburo saw the writing on the wall. He had these 3 kids. By now he had 3 of his own and a 4th on the way. My veterinarian business is just not doing it. I'm going to go to America, age 41. Leave all this behind. And Mono, you take care of everybody, and I'll farm in California. And that was how that affected my family. Now, he was able to earn enough to send my grandfather through Nagasaki Medical School, where he was known as one of the 3 geniuses. He did very well in medical school. This was during World War I, 1914 and 1918. After graduation, which in Japan is in April, he became an assistant to the Department of Pathology in Nagasaki Med School for a year, where he perfected his laboratory medicine technique. The next year, that same year, this is important, he met my grandmother, who was working in one of these private hospitals, the Asada Hospital, and they didn't get married right then, but they met. Now, the next year he goes off to the other part of Kyushu Island. Nagasaki and Kumamoto are in the southern part, and Fukuoka is up in the top. He goes there and joins a surgical department as an assistant under a Professor Goto Shichiro, and did research there that ended up earning a PhD. Notice this is 1919. He got his PhD in 1934. For those of you with dissertations to write, it's okay. Now, during that same year, another of his sisters, who had been born by then, named Kaoru, was dying of tuberculosis back in Kumamoto. Although he rushed back and tried to help her, she ended up dying. So another family tragedy from TB. The next month, December, he gets married, and they move to Fukuoka, Moto and my grandfather Kikuo. Let's see. Okay, and then the next year, boy, he moves around. He moves straight from there to California. His brother Tanenori had by then gone to America before him and was studying at Stanford. Stanford and SC were both very Japanese friendly. And then they went to visit his parents, my great-grandparents, who were living somewhere in San Gabriel Valley. Rumor says Temple City. I've not been able to confirm that. Now, meanwhile, one of my great-grandfather, Saburo's neighbors or friends, had a first impression of my grandfather. And what he said was, sorry, this is so slow. He was tall and thin, but not really too distinguished looking for a doctor. And there he is. This is his photo for his license application there in Sacramento State Archives. And I found this in the 80s. The exam was conducted, still is, in English only. And so after, he didn't pass the first time. So then he had the means, or it was a Kumamoto connection, where he was able to stay at a hotel in San Bernardino, study English medical terminology, and then he did pass in 1923. Now, he came 21, he passed in 23. What happened in 1922? My Auntie Aki was born in Fukuoka. And then 9 months later, she and my grandma came to San Francisco. And a Issei lady named Togasaki Shigeko helped her buy her first Western wardrobe, and let's hide the kimonos. Then they came to Los Angeles. They stayed a night in Little Tokyo's Higoya Hotel, and remember that. This is another Kumamoto person named Miyamoto Tsunezo. Remember that name, please. And then the three of them, my grandfather, his wife, and my Auntie Aki, they drive in his new Ford Coupe. They had money from somewhere. To San Gabriel, where they lived for a year. And then when he got his license in 23, they were able to move to Gardena and set up a clinic out of his home, as well as one here in Little Tokyo. Across the street from the Parker Center is a parking lot, which used to be where the Higoya Hotel was, and my grandfather and his colleagues' offices were. Now, they had a big party, 200 people partied in a restaurant here in Little Tokyo, and then the hospital nearby, which Mr. Inose had a hand in starting, was already there. It was the Turner Street Hospital, or the Nan-ka. Nan means south, ka means California. Nihonjin, that's Japanese people. Byoin is a hospital, or the Japanese Hospital of Southern California. On Turner Street, as you can see, it's not that many blocks away. I probably should have circled where today's museum is, but we're all in this area. This is the Turner Street Hospital at its peak capacity at 35 beds. There are so many stories of how it started, and someday we'll have to figure out what the truth is. I'm not going to go into this right now, but since the Inoseis are here, what we know about Mr. Inose is he's a long-time Little Tokyo resident. He was from Ibaragi Prefecture, immigrated to the US as a student and laborer. In 1895, he opened a Sunrise restaurant here on East 1st Street. 1902, he became involved in labor contracting in Oxnard, and his name is mentioned in connection with a 1903 strike. He was on the management side at the time. And made a fortune and co-chaired building a hospital, says one story, with a Mr. Komai of a Rafu Shinpo in 1915. I believe that's 95 years ago.